All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment in the Russia-Ukraine war, we're being joined by Mr. Ben Aris, who's a founder and editor-in-chief of BNE Intel News and also a former Moscow bureau chief for the Daily Telegraph. He's joining us live on this broadcast. Now, Mr. Aris, this is a pretty important statement that the Russians have made, where they've said that they will not negotiate, considering the fact that Ukraine has now carried out incursion deep into the Kursk region. And according to the Ukrainians, they continue to gain more and more territory. With this incursion, are we to now to say that negotiations are completely off the table?
I think they're frozen. They're frozen for the time being. And if you think of the logic, the whole incursion into Kursk, people have been scratching their heads to say, what is the strategic goal here? But it's been suggested that Zelensky wants to have a territorial card to play in the mooted ceasefire talks that were supposed to happen in November. And Zelensky himself has called for a second summit, and that he was prepared to invite Russia to the summit. The previous one in Switzerland, Russia didn't come, and that they were hinting that there would be a serious attempt to find a ceasefire. However, as you said, Putin has made it very clear you have to take care of the realities on the ground, which of course means the four regions that Russia's annexed, plus the land bridge, plus the Crimea. And that Zelensky, by going into Kursk, has given himself a territorial card. But then Putin's now made it clear, look, we're not going to do ceasefire talks as long as you have some of our territory. And it undermines the whole strategic point of this invasion. And all said and done, I think the Allies as well. I mean, if you read between the lines of the report, nobody believes that the armed forces of Ukraine can actually hang on to Kursk for a protracted length of time. They send in some of their best fighters, best equipment, but they're going to base the whole weight of the Russian army that's going to come at them eventually.
But the incursion by the Ukrainians began on the 6th of August. Today is, of course, the 20th of August. So for almost 2 weeks now, the Russians have not been able to hit back with enough force to push the Ukrainians back in the Kursk region. Why has Russia so far not been able to push back the Ukrainian incursion?
Well, you say able, and that implies the Russians actually want to do that, because it's a question of strengths here. That, as you reported along the Donetsk line there in Ukraine itself, the fighting is intense. And what we've been seeing is that Russia has moved some troops out of Ukraine and fallen back to help contain the AFU, which are in Kursk, but surprisingly small amounts and surprisingly weak troops. And the point is, I think here that Putin, it seems the picture that's emerging is that the Kremlin has decided to, rather than weaken its attack in Donetsk, because that's another strategic goal here, is that the idea is to do a diversion in Kursk and get Russia to remove significant amounts of troops to go to Kursk. And that would relieve the pressure on the front line in Ukraine. Because Ukraine is losing there. I mean, the Russians are making steady advances. And you mentioned the key town of Kursk, that, the Russians are on the verge of taking that. That's a strategic logistical hub.
Right.
And if they get that, they break through into open country behind and then run amok in the same way that the AFU is running amok in Kursk and take on Kramatorsk, which is another key town. And then suddenly the whole Ukrainian line looks like it's going to collapse. So rather than sacrifice that strategic initiative that the Russians are in the middle of for the protection of Kursk, they've just contained the forces and they're willing to just let them sit there because they can't actually do that much now. They've got it. And then make their breakthrough in Ukraine, possibly see the whole Ukrainian line collapse, and then come back to Kursk and deal with the AFU that's still sitting there.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ben Aris, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.